Abolitionist Intimacies, written by L. Jones, narrated by Aiza Ntibarikure. Dedication. I dedicate this book to all incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. I wrote to honor all who have lost their lives in this country's carceral institutions, and all who have lost their lives after release due to neglect, lack of resources, ongoing trauma, and systemic violence, including the criminalization of drugs. I remember the words of a young incarcerated man who told me, "One way or another, we all will be released." May that release come through freedom, and may we continue to fight for liberation and a world where prisons no longer exist. Destruction. A love poem. There's a statue of your rapist overlooks the square where people gather, and high up on the hill there's a plaque to the men who shot your father, and the knowledge of their deeds, it just passed through them like water. So another generation learns from them to rape your daughter. I heard you moved onto a street named for men who led the slaughter. And when you begged to take it down, they told you go sit in the corner. And they say their speech is sacred and yours just never matters. So the boot heel of the past will crush your throat forever after. But if you go get the ropes, I'll bring the bulldozer. Because what we learned from our history is how quick their idols shatter. And they taught us how to wipe away and end the day in laughter. Like your grandmother's grandmother whispered, "Soon, dear, it will be over." Introduction. Rememberings. When I tell the story of my introduction to prison abolition, I begin with reading Oscar Wilde's The Ballad of Reading Jail, 2018. Growing up, I always saw the thick covers of Wilde's collected works high up on the bookcase, and thus I understood the book as a symbol of adult reading and of the mysteries of adulthood. When I was around 13, we went to Trinidad to celebrate my grandmother's 90th birthday. Stuck in the family home, I found my aunt's copy of Frank Harris's biography of Oscar Wilde. Recognizing Wilde's name, and very conscious of reading something importantly mature, encountering Harris's excerpting of Wilde's ballad had a particularly moving effect on me. I immediately memorized many of the verses, and when we returned home, I took my parents' book from the shelf and read the entire poem. I likened the reading of Wilde's poem to a kind of reverse Narnia. Rather than stepping into the fantasy world from which children are ejected upon aging out, reading Wilde was my entrance into understanding what I keenly understood as serious issues. For the first time, I acutely recognized an accounting of injustice. I grew up in a family marked by colonization where, in my own mother's lifetime, Trinidad had become independent. Later, the works of Eric Williams, C.L.R. James, Claudia Cumberbatch Jones, and other Trinidadian writers and thinkers would influence me, but at this age, I had only my mother's family stories of oppression and resistance, which I had yet to apply to a more global analysis of power. Similarly, while I had intimations of feminist analysis as a young girl, I had not yet developed a feminist framework and certainly had not yet encountered the works of Black feminist writers. Reading Wilde was an opening into the world of social justice, of clearly seeing a wrong and burning to right it. I often tell people I became an abolitionist at 13. Around that year, we had to write an essay in social studies class, and while most other girls chose issues such as photoshopping in magazines, I decided to write on women in prisons. This was in the 90s. Looking back, I can assume I was influenced by the dialogue sparked by the 1990 report by the Task Force on Federally Sentenced Women, Creating Choices, the public discourse around the strip searching of the women at Kingston's Prison for Women, which would lead to the Arbor report.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?